Is there moral truth? Is there some foundation for ethical beliefs that all of us can agree to? There was one man in modern American history who concluded from a prison cell that there was a law we have to live by, both written and unwritten.
My uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., wrote a letter when he was incarcerated in Birmingham, Alabama. There was a lot of strife and racial tension there. Black people, we were called Negroes in those days, were being slaughtered, literally. And so it was during these times that my uncle was leading the protest and saying that this was really unjust. During my uncle's lifetime, when he had to consider whether he would obey the law or disobey the law, if the law of the land was something that was going to harm what he called the least of these, then he would go to the higher law, the divine law, the natural law. Dr. King would always say, if a law is unjust, it is our moral responsibility to resist the unjust law. And that is the basis of the civil rights movement.
According to the tradition of natural law, there are great moral truths, including truths about the fundamental dignity of human beings, that while revealed in Scripture, are also, at least in principle, knowable by reason itself.
What I think King proves more than anything else, that there is a truth which is knowable. And one of the things that's crucial here, if we're going to rebuild any kind of an ethical consensus in our common lives together, is that we agree there is some standard that we're going to live by. So truth has got to be knowable for there to be ethics.
So if you say that it's always wrong to torture children for the fun of it, that statement is true. And it's true in every culture. It's true whether we want it to be true or not. It's simply dead on true. If there were no truth, or if we couldn't know it, ordinary life would be virtually impossible.
Let's assume the moral relativist is correct, there is no truth. What happens to a society that really embraces that and carries it to its logical conclusion?
You'd find yourself unwilling or unable to condemn the crimes of Hitler, you know, the gratuitous murders of millions of people, or of Stalin, or Mao, of Pol Pot, or the terrorist attacks from Al-Qaeda.
If you're a purely accepted moral relativist position, then you have no ground on which to stand to say why another person is wrong in whatever they do. There's either truth about man and the nature of what a good society and a good life is, or all decisions are made based on power.
The Bible says it's written on the heart. It really is something we know, and this is what King was appealing to.
It had been proposed perhaps it's written on the heart. However, an increasingly popular view, especially in evolutionary biology, is that it's written on the genes. How do we proceed from there?
That's a very good question. These things, as the questioner suggests, may be written on our beings by the process of evolution as we've come to learn to live together and so on. Good question. What about that argument?
We experience ourselves as moral agents. We experience ourselves as free, as able to make choices between right and wrong, good and evil. I'll give you an earthy example. A dog makes decisions, but they don't make free choices, right? A dog looks at the food in front of them and says, there's a lion back there. Well, I won't eat it because I don't want to get eaten by the lion, okay? But no dog looks at another dog and thinks, wow, she's beautiful, but I think I'll wait till marriage. Okay? That doesn't happen.
Almost.
I confess I've never heard that analogy.
If we're talking about ethics, we have to understand that there's got to be a standard of what ought to be beyond personal survival, or beyond personal autonomy, or any of the code words we hear on campuses today or in public discourse. There's got to be some higher value, and there'll never be an ethical standard unless there is a truth which can be known by all, a truth that cannot not be known because it's true. There's a certain way the world is made, and seeking that which is truth is the great goal of life. And out of that comes an ethical system.
Well, good morning. It's a joy to be here back at my alma mater. Thanks for that kind introduction, Frank. And Dr. Cory, we're proud of you. We love you, doing a phenomenal job. And thanks for what you're doing, Colson. You are one of my heroes in life. I teach at a Christian school in Southern California, and in Orange County. A couple years ago, I heard about a school that had a free-thinking atheist club just down the street. And they were getting hundreds of students out to these events. So I contacted them. I said, hey, if you guys are really free thinkers, why don't you bring a Christian in to talk about what we believe, and you can fire tough questions at me as long as you want to stay. Well, about 10 of them one afternoon ended up coming over to my classroom for about 2 hours with some of my students. We had a riveting discussion about God, about the Bible, about morality. And at the very end, this student said, you know, I've got one last thing to say. And I think he caught kind of the mood or perspective of morality that most people have today. He said, you know, maybe we're both right. Maybe your views about God and morality are true for you. And maybe our views about God and morality are true for us. In other words, there is no universal truth that applies to everybody. Now, here we're talking about doing the right thing today. What does that presuppose? That there is a right thing. So why is truth so important? Chuck said one of the first things we have to establish is that there is such thing as truth. Why should we even care about truth? Well, many of you will know the name Frank Beckwith. He used to teach at UNLV. He had a class on ethics, and he had a student who just was the class relativist who pestered him during the whole class period. And finally, at the end of the class, she stands up. She goes, Dr. Beckwith, all semester, you've been talking about why truth is so important. She said, why does truth even matter? Why is it important? And as witty as he is, he says, well, would you like the true answer or the false answer? Now that was brilliant because her very question assumed that there's such a thing as truth. Look, I hear people say in terms of this younger generation, they don't care about truth anymore. They don't believe in moral absolutes, and I don't believe them. Look, if I tell my students, hey, Friday, we're going to have a pizza party, no school. I show up and I say, I changed my mind, we're having a test. I'll be given reasons, and they will appeal to truth and an objective moral standard that they think I've broken. In fact, someone who illustrated why truth is important so well in our culture is Oprah Winfrey. Remember the story? Do you remember this book, A Million Little Pieces, that came out 2 or 3 years ago? It was by James Fry. When it was on the Oprah's Book Club, it sold 1.7 million copies. Only Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince sold more that year. Well, certain sites like Smoking Gun started to realize and pick up that this was a fabrication, that it wasn't true. And you know how he defended himself? He said, well, it's the emotional truth. And at first, Oprah defended him. She said, this is much ado about nothing. But people kept crying up and saying, wait a minute, this isn't true, this isn't right. And you know, she brought him on the show. And some of you probably saw this. She confronted him in person and directly, you know what she said? She said she felt duped and, quote, I left the impression that truth is not important. Wow. This is something the Apostle Paul said 2,000 years ago, didn't he? The Apostle Paul said in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 10, he said, with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of truth, so is to be saved. Do you love truth? Are you here this morning because you love truth and your heart is broken for a generation that has bought lies? Now, before we can talk about how we know there is truth, let's take a minute and define it. I go all around, I get to speak to churches and young people and ask people to define truth. And rarely can somebody actually give me a cogent definition of what truth is. Now, philosophers use something called the correspondence theory of truth. And it might sound fancy, but as we process it, you realize it's actually common sense. The correspondence theory of truth says a statement is true if it matches up with reality. So truth is when you describe the world as it actually is. I live in San Juan Capistrano, and if I told you I drove here this morning in 22 minutes, well, the reason I did it is because I drove in my new red 2011 Lamborghini. And you walk outside and you see that car with little Spider-Man dangling down, big Spider-Man fan. My statement just might be what? Oh, come on, Frank, just humor me. I know I'll never have a Lamborghini. Just work with me here. Someday maybe you'll let me borrow one of yours. Got to be careful, he's got the microphone next. Now you walk outside and you see that, my statement would be true. Now if you walk outside and you see this, my statement would be false. Why? because it's yellow and I said that it was red. Now, if you walk outside and you actually see this car, which is parked in the parking lot, I don't know why you're laughing. I bought American. I had an 8th grader laughing a couple weeks ago. He goes, aha, and I said, now you're in 8th grade. Tell me what kind of car you drive. That's what I thought. Now, truth is simply when a belief matches up with the world. That's what it means for something to be true. My son is 6 years old, and we actually like to play this game together, where I teach him little things like truth. I'll put a word up, and I'll put an object. And if the word corresponds to the object, and superheroes in his case, and mine, you have truth. You see, truth is describing the world as it actually is. Could you tell that kid to take his headphones out in my talk? I think that's kind of rude. No, I'm just kidding. Now, what'd you do when I said that? Some of you parents thought, dear God, I hope it's not my son or daughter back there. But many of you turned, you're like, man, I thought this guy was decently nice. Now he's calling somebody out in the middle of his talk. You turn to see who had their headphones on in the middle of the session. Now, since nobody actually did, my statement was what? My statement was false. If somebody actually did, my statement would be true. You see, that's how truth works. We make statements, and we go see if the world is the way we have described it to be. Now, in one sense, you're probably sitting there going, I may or may not have known the term correspondence theory of truth, but this is a very common sense way of using truth. This is how everybody thinks about it, and you're right. But here's the catch. As soon as the topic shifts to morality, or as soon as the topic shifts to religion, people will change what is meant by truth. Everybody uses the correspondence theory of truth. You can't not use the correspondence theory of truth. But when the topic shifts to moral values and ethics, or the topic shifts to religion, without even realizing it, in the minds of many people in our secular culture, they will change what is meant by truth. Now, I'm going to use an illustration I was taught by Greg Kokel, who personally mentored me to sink this home. Now, if I was going to ask you your favorite flavor of ice cream, you might shout out chocolate, strawberry, cookie dough, sherbet, which is not an ice cream. And to save you the time, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what the best flavor of ice cream is. I'm going to help you out. The best flavor of ice cream is chocolate peanut butter. Now, by a show of hands, who says that is true? Let me see your hands. About 10 of us. Who says that is false? Everybody else. Now, this is an odd predicament because what we're saying is the same statement, chocolate peanut butter ice cream is the best, can be true and false at the same time. Now, you realize this is not a problem because what we're talking about is subjective truth. Subjective truths are personal or private, or as it said in the film, opinion, and they can change. So why do we call it subjective truth? Because the subject or individual believing it makes it true for him or her. So if I say chocolate peanut butter ice cream is delicious, I'm not really making a statement about the ice cream. I'm making a statement about myself. That's what subjective truth is. It's internal as opposed to being external in the world. Now, what if I said chocolate peanut butter ice cream controls diabetes? Could that be true for some of you and false for others? No, this is a different kind of claim. In fact, a kind of claim that has consequences, doesn't it? You see, this isn't a claim about my preferences, like ice cream. This is an objective claim about the way the world actually operates in itself. Now, subjective truth refers to the subject. Objective truth refers to the object. It's a fact about the world that we discover. We don't change it. Now, I'm going to ask you to participate here with me for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some statements up on the board right behind me here. And they're going to be one of two kind of statements, either objective statements or subjective statements. If it's a subjective statement, I'd like you to shout out ice cream. If it's an objective statement, I'd like you to shout out insulin. Because insulin actually controls diabetes. Now listen carefully, I'm not asking if these are true or if these are false. I'm asking what kind of statement are these? Subjective, shout out ice cream. Objective, shout out insulin. Here we go. Coke tastes better than Pepsi. Ice cream, that's a preference. Even if you don't like Coke, you know that's a preference type claim. Diet Cola has fewer calories than regular Coke. Insulin, okay? That's a claim about the world in itself. George Washington was the first president of the United States. Okay, good. Now this is a historical claim. So claims of history deal with objective truth. They're not preference claims. There's a truth about historical claims. Okay, how about this one? Hawaii is the most beautiful vacation spot on earth. Ice cream, good. We all know it's San Juan Capistrano. Action movies are more enjoyable than romances. Now I know some of you guys are clenching your teeth, not willing to give ground on this, but this is an ice cream claim. It's preference, even if someone didn't like movies. How about this one? Biola President Barry Cory can bench press 250 pounds. Now hold on. Show hands, who says ice cream? Who says insulin? Who says, I don't know, I don't want to offend the new president. I'm not, well, okay. Now listen very carefully. Do you know for sure whether or not he can bench press 250 pounds? No, you don't. To answer my question, whether it's ice cream or insulin, do you need that information? No, you don't. Remember, all I'm asking is what kind of claim is this? Is this a claim in which there's an objective truth in the world? Or is this a claim which is purely dependent upon my subjective internal preferences? Now, I don't know whether he can do it or not. We would put him up here, throw some weight gloves on, put on some 45s to see if he can throw it up. Either way, there is an objective truth about whether he can do it or not. So there can be objective claims for which we don't know the answer. If I said there's 50, 100, quadrillion, septillion atoms in the universe, I don't think we could ever know that. But that's still a claim about objective reality, isn't it? That's still a claim about the external world. How about this one? Earth is the center of the solar system. Now, I heard a mixed and a little quiet on this one. Now, this statement is false, isn't it? This is a false insulin claim. It's a claim about reality, but it's a false claim about reality. And this is not a historical claim, it's what? It's a scientific claim. So far, you've told me historical claims and scientific claims deal with fact and with objective truth. How about this one? Abortion is wrong. I heard both on this one. Now, this is not a scientific claim. This is not a moral claim. This is not a historical claim. This is a moral, ethical claim. Are moral claims dealing with objective reality that exists in the world outside of our thinking? Or are all moral claims internal preference claims about what we like or what we don't like? Now, I like to get into conversations. Sometimes I get myself in trouble. When we go to family parties, my wife says, just be nice today. It's fun to stir it up. Well, I was speaking with a man a while ago, and he said, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. I said, sorry to bring up the obvious, but I can't. I said, I got a question for you. Are you against slavery? He said, of course. I said, if you don't like slavery, don't own a slave. What's the big deal? Now, why was he against slavery? Is it because he doesn't like it? It's because he thinks it's actually wrong. You see what he was saying about abortion? He was saying, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. If you don't like chicken, get the fish. If you don't like chocolate, get vanilla. As if the question of the morality of abortion is purely a subjective claim. So I challenged him on this. He got a little confused because why are we against slavery? because we think it's wrong to enslave a human being because of skin color. It's objectively wrong. We celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. a while ago. People weren't out there because they didn't like slavery. Hey, we don't like it. They're saying that it's objectively wrong. And racism is actually wrong. In fact, as they pointed out on the video, if there is no objective standard of morality, then can we judge anybody for doing anything morally wrong? Can we? If morality is like ice cream, we have no more right to make moral judgments than we do to make judgments about somebody's ice cream preference. In fact, who are we to judge Bernie Madoff for embezzling billions of dollars and harming people if morality is like ice cream? Who are we to make any judgments about what's going on in Egypt and some oppression that's maybe taken place on behalf of the government if morality is like ice cream? Who are we to judge? I say this to my students and they don't get it. I go, really? If you think morality is like ice cream, I said, who are we to take a guy who says to a girl, completely lies to her, deceives her, tells her he loves her, cares about her, get her in bed, and then the next day completely uses her, sends out a Facebook bomb talking about what she's like, and then never returns a call? If morality is like ice cream, who are we to judge? We have no right to judge any moral acts if morality is like ice cream. Friends, I have done this to tens of thousands of students around the country. Every single time, between 70 and 90% shout out that abortion or whatever moral issue I put up there is like ice cream. Because the mood of our culture is that right and wrong is internal, it's subjective. You can have your truth and I can have mine. But you know what? When a young person tells me they think morality is subjective, I don't believe them. I don't believe our culture is really morally relativist. They just select which morals they think are important and which morals they think are objective. Because it says in Romans, as Colson pointed out in the video, Romans chapter 2, verse 14 through 15, for when the Gentiles who do not have the law do instinctively the things of the law, these not having the law are a law unto themselves, in that they show the work of the law written where? In their hearts. Part of being made in the image of God and being a human being is that we know there's such a thing as right. And we know there's such a thing as wrong. Look, if you climb on top of this building, you jump off and you think you can fly, there's something objective called gravity that is going to have something else to say. And we don't want to clean you up. Just as there's laws of gravity that exist in the objective world outside of us, there are laws of morality that exist objectively as a transcendent standard beyond all of us. In fact, this is what our Declaration of Independence says, doesn't it? Our founding document, listen to the words carefully. We hold these truths to be what? Self-evident. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, all people are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. In other words, people often ask, how do we know that certain things are wrong? And the answer is what? It's obvious. It's self-evident. He gave the example in the video. He said torturing an innocent child for fun is universally wrong. And anybody who understands the nature of a child, anybody who understands the nature of a torture and understands the nature of fun, if you put those together, it's self-evident that such an act is wrong. Just like we look at 2 plus 2, and it's obvious once we know the nature of it, that it equals 4. Or all men are mortal, Socrates is mortal, it's obvious that what? Socrates is a man, you meant what I knew. It's self-evident that Socrates is mortal. It's obvious once we reflect upon the issue. In fact, this is why philosopher William Lane Craig says, if you don't think rape is evil, You don't need an argument. You need therapy. And if this is the case for any of you, I'm happy to give you an appointment to my sister, another Biola grad who's a psychiatrist. So you want to know what somebody really believes about morality? It's not by what they say, but what? Actually, I fooled you. It's not by what they say. It's not by what they do. You want to know what somebody really believes in their heart about the objective status of morality? It's not by what they say, it's not by what they do, but by how they want to be treated. Everybody wants to be treated as if morality is an objective feature of the universe. It's inescapable. We all want to be treated. In fact, here's a good one for LA. If somebody says there's no such thing as morality, objective morality, cut them off on the freeway. Right? As C.S. Lewis would say, if somebody says there's no such thing as objective morality, cut in front of them in line. What's their response going to be? Oh, wait a minute, I got here first. As if there's some transcendent moral standard that you and I are both obligated to, and the first person who is there has the moral right to go first. You see, again, it's written on our hearts. In fact, Frank Turek would say, we know people's beliefs about morality not by their actions, but by their reactions. We know people's beliefs about morality not by their actions, but by their reactions. That's why when somebody tells me they're a relativist, I don't believe them. I never believe them. In fact, one of my professors here, my beloved professors who teaches alongside Scott Ray in the philosophy department, he told a story. I loved it so much I put it in my book Ethics, about when he was at the University of Vermont a number of years ago. He would go into a college dorm and he would share his faith, the 4 spiritual laws, with students. And the 4 spiritual laws is God has a wonderful plan for your life. We've sinned, been separated from God. Because of Jesus, we can be back in relationship with God, and God will come in if we ask him. So J.P. Moreland walks into this freshman's dorm and asks if he can share the 4 spiritual laws. And the student says, well, sure, I'd be willing to listen. Well, he starts walking through the 4 spiritual laws, which assumes an objective moral standard. And the student at the end, he goes, well, that's wonderful for you. I have a different moral truth. You see, I don't think there's any objective moral norms that apply to everybody. You have your subjective moral truth and live accordingly. I have my subjective moral truth and follow those rules. And nobody has the right to judge anybody else on their moral actions. JP reaches out his hand, shakes it, says, thank you very much, walks towards the door, picks up the guy's stereo and takes off down the hall. Well, this guy comes running after him. He goes, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's my stereo. And JP goes, well, maybe I didn't understand you. He goes, see, I thought a minute ago you said there's no objective moral norms that apply to everybody. You have your moral truth, I have my moral truth. We shouldn't force our moral views on anybody else. I happen to think that if you're an upperclassman, you like to work out and need a stereo, you have the right to walk into a freshman's dorm unannounced, take their stereo and leave. Now, certainly, you're not going to force your moral views upon me. Now, that student is in philosophically what we call a bind. An unfortunate circumstance. So you know what? As soon as somebody says they don't believe in objective morality, just hang out with them long enough and they will contradict themselves. Last year we had a debate. We had a student debate between 3 of my students. We had this apologetics club and 3 students from this free-thinking atheist agnostic club. And it was on God. It was on intelligent design, on the resurrection, and then one was on objective morality. Well, I was moderating the debate, so I went out of my way to be fair to both sides and be as loving as I could. Well, towards the end of the debate, one of the students on the other side, he said, look, this whole thing about morality, he said there is no objective morality. There is no standard outside of human nature. You have your moral truth, and I have my moral truth. There is no correct answer for everybody when it comes to objective morality. You know what he did in his closing speech? It was at our church. he used the opportunity with the Christian audience, probably about half the side, to rail the Christian church for being intolerant, homophobic, and hateful. Now, I don't believe in ESP, but I was sitting there at the moderator doing everything I could to send the waves to my students to get them to realize the contradiction here. And you see it, don't you? Within probably 5 or 10 minutes, he stands up and says there's no objective morality, there's no standard for everybody, and then the moment he has a chance to talk about the church, what does he do? He rails us for being hateful, homophobic, bigoted, and intolerant, which assumes what? That there's an objective moral standard, and he disagreed with us about what is the right thing, but what did he not disagree about? That there is a right thing. He disagreed about what we ought to do to follow the right thing, but he didn't disagree about whether or not there is a right thing. See, this is where C.S. Lewis says, he goes, people don't disagree about objective morality. He goes, they disagree about the facts. They disagree about the facts. So here's a question Scott Klusendorf taught me to ask to bring home what is the question about abortion. He said, imagine that a 5-year-old walks up to you and holds something behind their back and says, Mommy, can I kill this? What are you going to ask? What is it? If you pull it out and it's a stink bug, you're going to say, please, just not on my carpet. If you pull it out and it's a cat, you're going to say, hurry up. If you pull out and it's a bunny, you're going to say, now, okay, wait a second. If he pulls out and he says, hey, I was walking down the street, I saw this carriage and this funny little infant, can I kill this? You would say, no, time out, you need counseling, because you think that's even an option at 5 years old. What's the principle? How we treat something depends upon what it is. It depends upon what it is. If the unborn is just a tissue, then no justification is necessary. If it's a member of the human race, then what justification is adequate? Friends, there is such a thing as truth, and it's written on our hearts, and we know it. Let me close with an encouragement. Why are we here talking about doing the right thing? It's not because we're right. It's not because we want to prove everybody else wrong. It's because Jesus said the truth shall set you free. And we have a culture that has bought lies, and it's enslaved them, and it's destroying them. If you are motivated by anything besides a broken heart at the damage that lies cost, then please don't even bother to do the doing the right curriculum. Because let me tell you something. If you speak up for truth in our culture, you'll be labeled bigoted, hateful, intolerant. You'll be attacked. Last week, I stood up for a moral issue. I refused to compromise it. And the internet filled with personal attacks that when I got my wife on the phone, tears came to my eyes. It hurt so deeply to have people who are Christians call me that. And I sent out a tweet and I said, how do we become resistant to criticism so it falls off our back like water on the back of a duck? And immediately a friend of mine, Lenny Esposito, he responded back and he said, I don't think you would want to. Suffering is the mark of a disciple. Friends, we are on the winning side. That should not motivate us to arrogance. That should motivate us to compassion, to have a broken heart, to suffer for those who believe the lies of the enemy. Thanks for a chance. I look forward to meeting many of you in person.